Councilor Mark McGovern. Welcome to our Safe Streets, Safe Cities meeting. The Safe Streets, Safe Cities meeting is a series of meetings that actually I started, I want to say almost a decade ago. And the purpose of these meetings that I started back in 2016 wasn't just to address issues that are happening in our community in real time, but also to be a way to be proactive about looking into and trying to prevent problems before they rise to the top. But we've also used this forum as an opportunity when an incident happens to talk to the community. And so that's part of why we're having this meeting today. My colleague, Councilor McGovern, and I have been talking about what was going on in the Riverside neighborhood. And we first talked about maybe we should have a city council committee hearing. That takes time to get on the calendar, and we knew how important this was. And so we used the context of the Safe Streets meeting to have this informational meeting. So I want to thank everyone for logging in. While we're trying to hold these community meetings throughout the warmer months, regardless of whether or not there is a violent incident reported, tonight's meeting has been called in direct response to a couple of troubling incidents that have taken place specifically. We are focusing on the gunshots fired on August 19th near Hoyt Field and the gunshots fired on August 27th in the area of McGee Street and Putnam Gardens. Tonight, we'll be hearing from the Cambridge Police Department. You'll be hearing from my colleague, Councilor McGovern, who's my co-host tonight, the Cambridge Police Department, our city manager, Owen O'Riordan. We also have with us District Attorney Marianne Ryan, who may want to give a few remarks, as well as part of the command staff with Commissioner Elu. After we have gotten some background information about what has been happening, we're going to open the chat feature to ask questions. Many of you that have participated in these meetings before know we use the chat feature to take in questions. So for tonight, I will ask those that are here to focus their questions on August 19th and August 27th. That's why that is the call of this meeting. We'll also be speaking as we come toward the end of the meeting. The meetings are planned for about an hour, but we do leave about another half an hour if we need it, so that we can hear from people that want to be heard. There will be follow-ups, and Councilor McGovern and I will either do it in a committee hearing, depending on what the follow-ups require of us, or we always have this vehicle, which is the Safe Streets Forum, to have those discussions. So I've sort of gone over who we'll hear from first. They're going to talk about the incidents, the city staff, be it the commissioner, the city manager, will talk about who was injured, whether we know who fired the firearms, and what the city's response to those incidents has and will be going forward. More broadly, we're going to continue the conversation on how we can all work together to make this a safer community. I don't want people to walk away thinking this is a one and done. I also want to make note that Mayor Siddiqui, who's very supportive of these forums, cannot be with us this evening, but she does have her chief of staff, Michael Scarlett, who will be taking copious notes and reporting back to her on about the follow-ups. So thank you, Mr. Scarlett, for being with us this evening. I also want to note that while we would always prefer these community meetings to be in person, we are still practicing caution due to the continued threat of COVID. As Chief Neal from the Department of Public Health often says, we may be tired of COVID, but COVID's not tired of us. And so in that context, we are having the Zoom meeting so that we can have as much participation as possible without putting people in harm's way. We are also recording the meeting. There was some discussion, should we record or not record? All Safe Streets, Safe City meetings are recorded, because people that are not able to attend will have the opportunity to go back and view what was happening, what was discussed, what were some of the outcomes. So I'm going to remind you when we get to the Q&A, we are going to use the chat feature for that. So I want people to submit their questions throughout the meeting, and I'm going to go through as many of those as possible as far as time will allow. If the question is off topic, we may not answer it, but please know that I'll read it out as many on topic questions as I can get to in the second half of the meeting. Now that I've sort of gone over, one thing I think is always important, I know that these are challenging times and people's sensitivities and feelings and emotions are heightened. But I always ask, and I want to just remind people, we want to always be courteous and when talking to each other. We're not indicting one group over another. It's really about having an opportunity to find out what's happening in our community, what the city is going to be doing. If you have suggestions about what we can or what you'd like to be done, we certainly want to hear it. One other thing I just want to say in terms of the meeting, at the City Council, we have a practice that if there are more than 20 people, we have the conversation amounts, the testimonies, however you want to call it, limited to 2 minutes. It doesn't mean you can't come back around, but we want to make sure we hear from everyone. So there's a number of city staff. I will not be introducing you, so please do not take offense. I want us to get into the meat of this meeting, have the information put out before us, and then go into the Q&A. So again, you'll hear from Councilor McGovern, after which you'll hear from our city manager, then Commissioner Elu. Let me go back. We're going to hear from Councilor McGovern. Then if District Attorney Marian Ryan would like to say something, she certainly has the floor to do so. And then we'll hear from the commissioner and her staff. And then we'll open the floor for Q&A. So having said that, again, I want to thank each of you for being with us this evening. I know these are hard times, but we will all get through it, and we will get through it together. Councilor McGovern, I'm going to yield the floor to you.
Thank you, Councilor Simmons, and I'll be brief so we can get right to it. I want to thank Councilor Simmons. As she said, she's been hosting these meetings for years, and I appreciate her including me tonight. This incident at Hoyt Field, I live a few blocks away from Hoyt Field, and my 21-year-old son was there that night. And so no one in this city is immune to violence and to what we're seeing in the community. I think sometimes, because Cambridge is a safe city, overall, and when you compare Cambridge to other communities, sometimes we can think that somehow we're immune to some of the things that other cities see or experience, and we're not. Violence can happen anywhere, and we're seeing it more and more amongst our young people, which is something that should concern all of us. And so, I'm tonight, just again, as I think Councilor Simmons did an excellent job of explaining what the purpose of tonight. I know that there are some folks who are hoping that we will get to sort of the meat of, talking about how we're going to address these issues and a plan for these issues, and, what we can do as a city to curb this violence. We may not get to all of that tonight, and that's part of a longer conversation, but an immediate conversation that we need to have, and an urgent conversation that we need to have. But tonight is really, again, to talk about this specific incident at Hoyt Field. I want to acknowledge that Councilor Burhan Azim is with us tonight, as well as State Representative Steve Owens. And I really want to thank everyone for being here. There's I think a really great mix. Tony Clark from My Brother's Keepers here, a really great mix of community members, as well as, city staff and elected officials and whatnot. And it is going to take all of us to address these issues and really wrap our arms around our young people so that these kinds of incidents don't happen. So thank you again, Councilor Simmons, and I will yield.
Councilor McGovern, thank you so very much. First of all, I want to apologize. I did not realize my camera was off until I went and actually looked at the camera. So I was not trying to be incognito. I actually forgot it was off. my apologies to all. District Attorney Marion Ryan, did you want to say a few words before we go on to Owen O'Riordan and then to the commissioner?
Councilor, thank you. I echo Councilor McGovern's thanks. You have kept us on task with this for a very long time and really have been the driving force, both in bringing the community together around these issues and in helping us to craft solutions. And I'm hoping that's where we will get to tonight. The commissioner and I and her staff, as well as my staff, have spent a lot of time looking at these issues, thinking about where we need to go. And I'm hoping to hear from the community in particular about their thoughts and then see if we can. I think Councilor McGovern is correct. We aren't going to solve this problem tonight, but we do need, I hope, to make some strides forward tonight. So thank you for including me.
And thank you. And you stated quite well where we all have to be all in. We have to kind of pull in the same direction. Unfortunately, if we all had a magic wand, it would stop tomorrow, but we don't. But what we do have, I believe I can say this with conviction, we all are in earnest about trying to solve the problems. And we have a number of initiatives that will be for the city council, and I'll say those toward the end of the meeting, that we'll be talking through that are just one in many things that we're going to do to try to stem the violence. But part of it is finding out what's the root cause. So thank you, District Attorney Ryan, for being with us. I'm going to now turn it over to Owen O'Riordan, our acting city manager. Mr. O'Riordan, you do have the floor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Simmons. Just want people to know that I'm going to be the acting city manager for another 6 days, after which time the new city manager, Yan Wong, will be taking over. And I also want to let you know that, the information that is gathered tonight, that which we hear tonight, I'll be passing on to him as he steps into this position. Again, I want to thank Councillor McGovern for his leadership, as well as Councillor Simmons in terms of what we're trying to do here tonight. Also want to acknowledge that the Cambridge Police Department has done an extraordinary job in working with the community around these issues. Again, thank you to District Attorney Marion Ryan for being here. I think she's a close partner with the city as we tackle some of these issues. Quite frankly, I'm here to listen this evening. I want people to understand that the city is committed to doing everything to support our work when it comes to reducing violence in the city, to making sure that our streets are safe and that our residents are as safe as they possibly can be. I think it's critical for us to listen to our residents, to listen to their questions, to acknowledge their concerns, and to take on their feedback. Just finally, I think I just want to acknowledge the extraordinary work that the police department is doing, from Commissioner Elo to the command staff to the patrol officers and the professional staff within the department. They just show incredible dedication and professionalism to their job. I think their response, their outreach, their follow-up and commitment to being a solution for some of the more complicated issues in the city are exemplary. And so, again, I just want to say thank you for organizing this meeting this evening, Councillor Simmons, Councillor McGovern, and I'll pass you on to Commissioner Elo. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. O'Riordan, for your remarks. Commissioner Elo, the floor is yours. And I do want to just, before you start, acknowledge something that your title's too long, but acting city manager Owen O'Riordan did say is we do realize that the police department does work very hard trying to not only hold the community together, but do it in a way that is not aggressive, but proactive and sensitive. And that's something that's important to acknowledge. And I say that only because as I travel throughout the country, that's not always the case. So I'm going to turn it over to our commission, but just to make briefly, I just want to acknowledge you also have with us the Cambridge Housing Authorities with us. I see Ms. Snowden Downing, and we also have the Department of Human Services, Deputy City Manager Ellen Seminoff, and a host of her staff is with us. And I just want to thank them for always being close by. Commissioner Elo, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, everybody. Thank you to Councilor Simmons and Councilor McGovern for having this meeting. I think this is the third Safe Streets meeting we've had this year. I really want to assure our community members that we have been working diligently, not just the police department, but the Department of Human Service Programs, the Department of Public Health, all of our city partners, Cambridge Housing, the District Attorney's Office, to do everything that we can to prevent violence from happening in the city this summer. We were working really hard. Unfortunately, on Friday, August 19th, there was a shooting in Hoytfield at approximately 10:30 p.m. I will be turning it over to my staff, who will give a few of the details that we're able to provide about that shooting. But, this is an active and ongoing investigation, not just that for that shooting, but also for the other shooting that happened on August 27th. So if we're not revealing too much, it's just because these investigations are active and ongoing. I just really also want to acknowledge, although any violence is too much, this has been the first shooting of the year in our city in which somebody has been injured. So absolutely, it is receiving all of the attention of the Cambridge Police Department and also our city partners. So I'm going to turn it over to Deputy Superintendent Pauline Carter-Wells, who will give us some more details about the shooting, and I'll be available all evening to answer any questions. Thank you.
Good evening, and my name is Pauline Wells. I'm a deputy superintendent, and I oversee the criminal investigations section here at the Cambridge Police Department. I do want to thank you for allowing me to come and speak. It is so very important, the work that's done around the city, and I truly appreciate it. As the commissioner said, this is a very active investigation, and it remains ongoing. The level of detail, as she said, we can provide is fairly high level at this point, but I want to do as best I can to give you as much as I can. Earlier in the day and night on the 27th, I'm sorry, on the 19th, there was a basketball tournament, as there's been basketball games all summer since the beginning of July. And it was widely attended for middle and high school aged folks here in the city. We had several officers working and attending the tournament on and off duty, as we do on most of those games, if not all of those games. And this happened to be the championship game that evening. So there was a lot of people in attendance there. The shooting happened after the basketball tournament was over. And there was probably a group of 50 people or so left. There was no reason to think that anything was going to happen at that point. And that's when the shooting occurred. 2 people were injured, 2 male teens, an 18-year-old and a 19-year-old. Fortunately, one of the victims was quickly discharged from the hospital. The other victim is stable, but was shot multiple times. Thankfully, the police were there very quickly once the call went out and got a very quick response for the proper emergency medical care for him right on site prior to him being taken to the Boston area hospital. After working throughout the night, and officers continue to aggressively investigate the incident, we searched for any additional evidence, seeking to speak with any witnesses or any residents with knowledge of that night's events. In total, we did recover 19 shell casings, which reflects that a lot of shots were fired, and thankfully, more people were not injured. We did also recover another firearm located in an alleyway nearby, and hopefully that will glean some evidence that will be beneficial to our investigation. As residents and the folks on here may know, there are no cameras in the parks. And as a result, we have been following up with residents and businesses in the immediate and surrounding area for any helpful clues, anything that people may have heard or seen, any video that people may have, private video or in the businesses. We do believe at this point there is one shooter. Unfortunately, the description we have is fairly limited. They were described as a short male wearing a hooded sweatshirt and all black clothing, running on Montague Street, headed in the direction of River Street. That's as much as I will talk about the, as far as the facts for the 19th. More recently, we've been investigating another incident involving 2 gunshots that were fired on Saturday night, August 27th, around 12:33 a.m. in the area of Magazine and Putnam. I'm sorry, in McGee Street and Putnam Gardens. There was a shot spotter activation that detected 2 rounds there. There was no 911 callers. The Cambridge police did respond immediately. They were unable at that point to locate any ballistic evidence. But we continued the investigation over the next couple of days and were able to locate 2 shell casings on the sidewalk on McGee Street that we believe is from that shooting. And at this point, there are no reported victims or suspects in that particular incident. With these incidents and with all incidents like this, we work very closely as the commissioner said, with all our partners in the city as well as outside the city. We communicate daily with our local partners, the district attorney's office, state police, neighboring jurisdictions, to coordinate any information that they may have on our shooting. We have a number of resources dedicated to the case. Several of our detectives are currently focused exclusively on this incident. And, you know, every day they're getting a little bit more and a little bit more, but it's very difficult. You know, when it's tough to get information, people aren't willing to talk necessarily, and totally understandable in a lot of cases. But it makes it difficult for us. But they are working night and day to get these 2 resolved, and hopefully we can do that soon. You know, it's also important to keep in mind that, you know, while any one incident is too many, we do have a safe community, as the commissioner indicated. You know, we haven't had a homicide in nearly a year and a half. Gun violence is down in the city. And at this point, I will stop and refer back to the commissioner, or we can go to another deputy superintendent.
Yep, I'm just not sure. Superintendent Cabral, do you have anything you'd like to add, or Deputy Superintendent Mega Hayes, as far as the outreach and the work that we've been doing collaboratively with some of our partners?
Absolutely, Commissioner. I'll just take a couple of minutes. Good evening. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Stephen Megahayes. I am the Deputy Superintendent that oversees the Family and Social Justice section, basically that oversees our youth resource officers and our outreach officers. So on the evening, since July 11th, there's been the fast break, which is the middle schoolers from 5:30 to 8 o'clock on Tuesdays and Thursdays at Hoyt Field. And then there's the crunch time, which is the high schoolers, 5:30 to 8 on Wednesdays and Fridays. On the evening of the incident, that Friday, obviously the championship game ran a little late, but we did have 2 of our youth resource officers, Frankie Greenidge being one of them, who was pretty much there Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays working with the actual basketball program. And I know Kesson Green's on the call, and he can always add to this as well. But we had 2 officers, our youth resource officers, on scene that day, and it ran until about 9:30, 10 o'clock. And the officers, I spoke with both officers who were there. DPW came, cleaned up, and then when the officers cleared the event, there were probably anywhere from 10 to 15 individuals who were involved with the basketball tournament, still kind of shooting around, but the majority of the individuals left. However, there was another group at the park, an older group at the park, where the incident took place. And then again, the incident took place probably 30 to 40 minutes after the event at Hoyt Field. But since July 11th, we've had multiple officers there Tuesday through Friday without any incident. I can specifically say that because on Thursdays we have our co-ed softball city league. And I remember seeing a group of 100, 200 people there, and I was present and officers present with no issues. Unfortunately, the day of the incident, it occurred, and it's a shame. However, some of the other programs that we've had running with is one of our newest programs was the community game night. It was something that we work with our partners at the Cambridge Housing Authority, and the Tenant Council. And basically what we do is it's Mondays and Wednesdays evenings, and we've had an average of 20 families, approximately 25 to 30 youth that live in Newtown Court and Washington Elms come out and play board games, wiffle ball, kickball, any games that they want to play. We've been doing that throughout the summer, and it's been a complete success. We just had our end of the summer Friday game night event on Saturday, and it was a success to the point where I have a meeting this Thursday with the Tenant Council and with the managers from Newtown Court, Washington Elms to extend that program per the wishes of residents that live there into the fall. And with that, we also have our CPD Youth Academy that has come to an end. We had approximately a dozen youth in the city up in Russell Field and throughout the port, working with the police department, with officers being the mentors, going through that. We've had success with our CPD boxing program. We actually have approximately 15 to 20 youth in that program now. And we've been doing a lot of going into Newtown Court, Washington Elms, and on the coast, trying to recruit some of the youngsters that don't know about the boxing program to come out and do that. So we've been running a lot of programs, very successful, and we plan on doing that throughout the fall and throughout the school year. I'm going to leave it at that, Commissioner, unless there's anything else you want me to add.
Nope, I think we're all set. Councilor Simmons, can I just send it back to you? Thank you.
Absolutely. Someone did mention Kesson Green. I did want to acknowledge that he's on the call. I also want to acknowledge Bishop Ward from Abundant Life, and Dr. Carolyn Turf from the Cambridge School Department is with us. A quick question. Let me first, Kesson, did you want to add anything before we open up to questions?
No, that's okay. I'm all set. We covered it.
Okay, very good. As I mentioned to people in the chat, please put your questions in the chat. There's a question that you'd like to have answered by the commissioner, the city manager, myself, or Councilor McGovern. One of the things, as Councilor McGovern and I started to put the word out in the community about this meeting, some people that are now that good with Zoom did have a few questions, and while we're waiting for other questions to populate the chat, a few of the questions I'll just lead off with. A couple of people wanted to know what was the age range. We keep hearing about young people versus adults, and so could someone speak, maybe for you, Commissioner, what were the age ranges of the people involved?
For the shooting on the 19th, they were 18 and 19 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And Deputy Wells, I'm not sure for the shooting on the 27th, do we have any ages?
The 27th, we do not have a victim or a suspect at this point, so we have no ages.
Okay, thank you. And I think that's important to know, because what the community often worries about, is it very young people, or is this what we, at our last Safe Streets meeting, it came up often that there's a group of individuals that seem to be outside what I'll call the social service band. We have Ellen Seminoff here with us, and we talked a lot about what we're doing for our young people, but there seems to be this interaction outside of the group that we have the closest hold on. And so what kinds of things we need to really think more about is what are we going to do to capture that age demographic, so that we don't continue to have these incidents, these violent interactions. One other question, and then I'll see if my colleague, Councilor McGovern, has one. At our very last meeting of Safe Streets, it was really focused on what was going on in Newtown Court and Washington Elms. And so one of the questions is there any relationship to what's happening with Somerville here? And the other thing is there still trouble brewing? So can anyone speak to that?
I could speak to that a little bit without giving out too much information on the current investigation. At this point, we have no reason to believe the incident on August 19th at Hoytfield is related to the ongoing issues with Somerville. So we don't believe that that's the case right now.
Okay. And is it quieted now? Is it this incident happened, or is there, you know, what happens happening in the port a lot is all about retaliation and bad blood. Do we have any feeling about that? Is there any retaliation feeling out there? Is this about bad blood? Does
So
anyone-
I would only be able to say that we don't believe this was involving the groups in Somerville. I'm not aware of any, you know, I can't speak to any bad blood that anybody may have had with regarding any other issues they may have with someone else or whatever, but this was not an issue with this group from Somerville and Cambridge.
Thank you. And then the last question that I have, and then I will turn it over to my council colleague, Councilor McGovern. And then I don't know if Council Azim is still with us. He may want to add his voice, and he certainly can do that. The other question is, people, particularly our senior citizens, are asking, so they want to feel safe, and they don't want to, they you know, it's warm, they want to get out, they want to walk the streets. What recommendations might you have, Commissioner, for our senior demographic in particular, about being able to feel safe while they're going out?
Right, sure. For me, what we'd just like to know is if they are in a particular area where we've been receiving a lot of calls for service about quality of life issues and just kind of, you know, disorder, like is in Central Square. And just if we can find out where those problem areas are, we are doing a lot of what we call directed patrols, where we'll send officers where there are groups of people that make our seniors feel unsafe, just for us to be there so people can come out and be safe. A lot of times we have a lot of people that are in the square, some unhoused, some not. And I just think the appearance of several people, some with their belongings, sometimes make people feel uneasy. I've been spending a lot of time in Central Square, and I can see kind of, it looks, you know, the optics don't look the best when you see large groups of people with their belongings. But people seem to be pretty safe walking the streets, but I do understand that people feel uncomfortable. So I just want to know where those areas are and when people are congregating, so we can direct our officers to those specific locations. But we have, I would say, at least tripled our presence, particularly in Central Square, doing some of our units are taking their calls specifically from there. We added a unit that is only that is not responding to calls for service, but is just moving around the square as for visibility and to make people feel comfortable. So we do understand that people are not feeling safe just due to the, you know, sheer numbers of people that are out in Central Square, and we're doing our best to manage some of the issues in Central Square. We do have a large number of people, we believe some from Boston, that are coming over, and we offer a lot of services in the city. So this is an attractive place for people to come. And for us at the police department, we want to be there. We want people to feel safe. And we also want to be really respectful for people that are just, you know, wanting to sit in Carl Barron Plaza and talk to their friends. So it's a balance. We have seen an increase in drug dealing in the square, and we're really trying to be laser focused on the people in the square that are causing harm and bringing harm into the square. So that's where our enforcement base will be. And then for other people that might be, you know, using substances or have substance use disorder, we really want to try to connect them to services. So, you know, this is Cambridge is an attractive place for people who are unhoused or people who suffer from substance use disorder to come and hang out due to all the services. And we're doing, you know, the best we can to really manage the quality of life issues in Central Square.
And I thank you for that. And I know that we're dealing with Central Square on an ongoing basis, but just to kind of bring us back to the Riverside area just for a moment, some of the people that have made mention live on Howard Street and on Calendar Street. They're at 808, 812 Memorial Drive. And they like to come and use the Riverside Press Park. They walk around the area and they just want to have a sense of that it, you know, is it safe? I say to them, it certainly is. I think we have to message better that it is clearly this incident was focused after the event, not at the event, but after the event, and really is no commentary on the Riverside neighborhood. And I think it'd be smart for us as city leaders to figure out how we message that, because
Sure. Sorry.
Go ahead,
I'm sorry, I misunderstood because we haven't had a lot of calls for service in the Cambridgeport neighborhood. That's also my neighborhood where I grew up. We haven't had calls at Riverside Press Park for quality of life issues. We have, as Deputy Mega Hayes talked about, because due to the basketball games and the sheer numbers of people that are attracted to those basketball games, we've had people at Hoyt Field, you know, just watching those games and being there for just in case, you know, any sort of beefs pop up. But we haven't had complaints from residents about just people hanging out and not feeling safe walking through the Cambridgeport neighborhoods. I have not heard that.
Thank you. Counselor McGovern, did you have a question that you wanted to put out there?
Yeah, thanks, Counselor. I just wanted to do a quick follow-up, and I might have some other questions later as well, but we heard you know, about a number of programs that the police department has been running, you know, this summer, and they do year-round programs. DHSP runs programs. DHSP runs programs. We have great nonprofits. Sorry, I'm turning off my ringer. We have great nonprofits like Friday Night Hype and My Brother's Keeper and others that run programs. There's really no shortage. Youth sports. I mean, there's tons of things for young people to do in this city, and obviously large numbers take part in those programs. But we're clearly missing some, right? And some of those young folks are folks that maybe are more involved in some of the gun activity that we're seeing in the city, and either they're going to those programs and something's not clicking, or they're doing things when they leave, or those programs aren't sort of appealing to them, you know, from the beginning. So I guess for the commissioner or you know, anyone else from DHSP or whoever wants to jump in, what are we doing specifically? We're not a big city, right? We know who these kids are, right? And young people are. What kind of sort of direct interventions, outreach, support are we giving to those young people who maybe aren't showing up at these multiple kind of, you know, more constructive activities that we sponsor?
Ellen, you want to try to take it next?
Sure. Thank you, Counselor Simmons. I just want to say first, which I know people said at the very beginning, that it's positive that we've not had so much gun violence, but just acknowledging the incredible tragedy of any of our young people being shot or any of our young people being involved in violence. And I know that that's what everybody was saying at the beginning, but I just want to acknowledge that. Before I directly answer, Councilor McGovern, your question, I want to describe something which I have other members of my team here, Michelle Farnham and Susan Mintz, who could speak more specifically to this. But one of the challenges is that it is not always the case that the young people who, and when I say young people, I'm talking about 17 to 30, and it is not always the young people who are completely disconnected from programs, who are also the young people, and then maybe I'm talking 18 to 24, who are also involved in the very activities that we're talking about, so that there is not a bright line here that, unfortunately, despite young people who are in fact engaged in programs, are still sometimes the very young people who, while they're in a job or while they're engaged in a program, are also engaged in activities which get them involved in ways that can lead to them being either victims or perpetrators in situations. So it's not that I don't mean to say you're wrong, Councilor McGovern, that there are young people who aren't connected, who need to be connected, but I want to just be clear that the experience of our staff through the variety of programs programs that we run, that basketball league, all of our field programs, our employment programs, many of these programs, we have youth who are in them, connected to people, and still we find them for a whole variety of different reasons engaged in the behaviors which end up getting them into big trouble. But I also want to say that we have as you pointed out, Councilor McGovern, we have a wide resource of programs, both in the nonprofits that we fund and support and partner with, as well as the programs that the city delivers itself. This summer, as I think many of the city councilors were hoping we would do, and Michelle Farnham could speak more to that now or at some other time, we really expanded what we were doing at night through the youth centers to engage youth that we hadn't had engaged, and to engage the very youth that we wanted to make sure were engaged in positive activities in a variety of different ways. The programs that we run that you all know about, the Cambridge Works program, the Next Up program, programs where young people who are not on track to be where they need to be, where we want them to be, a lot of them make it. And some of those very same young people, because you take a chance and you invest, end up 5 years later, maybe coming back, but a lot happened in those 5 years. So I think I join in what you were suggesting, which is we have a lot of programs and we have a lot of connections to an awful lot of the young people in this city. And it's not obvious which of the various interventions are the interventions which actually turn the corner, because many of the things we do actually do make a difference, but they don't end up making a difference for everybody.
Councilman McGovern, did you have a follow-up on that? Because I did have a follow-up statement.
No,
so-
no, I just, thank you, Counselor. No, I mean, I appreciate that. And that was sort of, I was saying that, even though, as I said, that even though some kids may take part in these programs, it doesn't mean that they're not going to engage in other activity. But I guess my question is really that is more about the fact that I think we have a relatively, we're not Boston, even, we're not New York, we're not LA, we're not Chicago. We have a relatively identifiable number of the most at-risk kids in our young people in our city. And I'm just wondering about what we're doing specifically, sort of like in the school district, if you have an IEP, you have an individual education plan that is directed towards the special needs of learning ability, challenges of that child, to say, we're going to give this child A, B, and C, and that may be different than the next kid, right? Not everybody needs the same thing. So I guess my really, what are we doing to provide direct support and direct intervention for the families and the young people that we know are the ones that are that need more help and need more support and are more at risk at hurting somebody else, right? Like it's a manageable number. And I'm just wondering, what are we doing to sort of directly impact those young people rather than the broader stuff that we're doing?
Can I take a crack at that, Councilor McGovern, just on some of what we're doing? Because as you know, we've had the Safety Net Collaborative since about 2008. And I think the population that you're describing are those that we can't really reach by that kind of early intervention diversionary effort, right? And there's always going to be that group. Unfortunately, youth violence can be very seductive. The sense of, we see it in the videos that get put out, is why Cambridge isn't unique to have a youth violence problem. From that ages of 15 to 22 is when across the board, especially young men, are most at risk to engage in this retaliatory violence. Their brains aren't developed to think about the consequences of their actions, and they're driven by emotion and pride. And And that's what we need to intervene on. And so from the police perspective, we try to take a focused deterrence approach to that, which is exactly what we're talking about. Can we identify who are those young people who are most at risk to engage in violence? Try to outreach, bring the full force of whatever we have in the city to provide off-ramps to that lifestyle, whatever that may be, whether it's jobs, housing, education, etc., mental health. But if that doesn't work and people still engage in violence, that as a community, we say that gun violence is our utmost priority, and there will be swift and certain consequences for those folks who continue to engage in gun violence. And it's just one approach to try to have that targeted sense that you're talking about, because that's what we're looking at. It's probably about 5%. And it's that 5% where we need to focus as much of our resources as possible.
I see that we could get a response from Dr. Barrett on this, but I did want to at least give my colleague, Councilor Azim, a moment if he wanted to chime in. Councilor Azim, do you want to say anything, or do you yield at this time? The floor is yours.
Councilor Simmons, I just wanted to first just thank you and Councilor McGovern for putting this together, and for the police commissioner and everyone else involved for all their support in this work. I had one very specific narrow question to add to the conversation. I think most of my questions you all have covered at this point. I think that specifically as this relates to the youth basketball, there's a lot of people who use Hoyt Field to play basketball throughout the week. And we have a group chat of about like 800 young adults in Cambridge who use that field. And there's been conversations about, shifting over to MIT and whether people really feel safe at Hoyt Field and things like that. And I was wondering if you had any message I could send to the players about whether, they should not go to Hoyt Field at certain times, or whether you feel like it's safe and issues have been addressed. And thank you, Councilor Simmons, again for giving me the floor.
Thank you. Commissioner Elu, do you want to address that question, or someone from your command staff?
I absolutely will take a shot at it. And if anybody from my team wants to raise their hand, I think, Hoyt Field is absolutely a safe place to play basketball. This was not a random incident. These were people that knew each other. This was very targeted. It was very specific. So I absolutely think that Hoyt Field is a safe place to play basketball. I think the city generally is a safe city. We are trying to just identify who are the perpetrators of violence and really focus our interventions and our, enforcement in those areas. But absolutely, I think Hoyt Field is safe. I'm not sure if anybody else wants to add anything to that.
Commissioner, if you don't mind, I just wanted to
Deputy Superintendent, please go ahead.
just one thing, there's also a softball. I play every Thursday night at Hoyt Field with, we play for the Cambridge Police Team, in which we have, residents that are on the team with us. It's not just police officers, and we play other teams from around the city. And we're there, every Thursday night. People are playing basketball, people are hanging around, and it's very, very safe. That's just my opinion.
And Councilor Simmons, could I add one thing as well?
Dr. Turk, yes.
Just for those who may not know, this was the second season actually that through a joint program, the Cambridge Public Schools and the Department of Human Services, as well as our Department of Public Works, we ran a very successful 4-week summer outdoor program at Hoyt Field. Very well attended and no problems at all.
Thank you, Dr. Turk. So it sounds like to me, if I can reiterate, Commissioner Elo is saying it was an isolated incident, and please correct me if I'm wrong. We have a basketball tournament. It brings together people from various and sundry places. And for whatever reason, 2 individuals get into it. I apologize for being relaxed in my conversation and my verbiage, but 2 people have a beef with one another, and they try to work it out in a violent manner. So is it safe for us to say to the community and folks that speak to us, one, Hoyt Field, the Riverside area is safe. This is an isolated incident. I think these folks were from Cambridge. I'm not sure. I don't remember at this point. And you might want to reiterate if they were from Cambridge or not, because that's what people worry about. And that's why you hear people saying, is it safe? Is it safe? Is it safe? That's number one. The second thing I wanted to say, and before I go on, I do want to acknowledge Chief Derek Neal from the Public Health Department for being with us. we often talk about our youth and we say 18 and our youth, and I take that to 18. But it seems to me, and this is an important difference, the violence that we see happening in our neighborhoods are not young people that we have in the plethora of programs that we offer. It's people that are outside that band, as I call it. Now, I know we're going to have some conversations coming up. Excuse me, we're planning to try and have a conversation around the Black Milk Commission at the end of September 29th, but that's down the road, and that will focus in part on adults. And that's just one method is this commission to look at what the problem is and then try to solve it. But I think we do so much for anyone 18 or under. I think we have that on lock in terms of supports and holding our young people, particularly young men. It's that older demographic that I think that we miss. And I think we just have to figure out how do we reach the unengaged young people of Black in particular, but Latino, that are coming together and trying to figure out the differences in a violent means. So I know Dr. Barrett's been waiting to speak, so I'm going to yield the floor to him, but I think it's just very important that we make sure that we all know when we say youth, at least for me, we're not talking about 14, 15, 16-year-olds. We're talking about young people, 18, 19, or 20, because that's the people in the last two incidents that have been involved with few exceptions. So Dr. Barrett, I'm going to turn it over to you, and then I want to see if Bishop Ward had a question that he might want to ask. And Bishop Ward, if you could put that into the chat, that'd be great. Dr. Barrett.
Thanks, Councilor Simmons. I had already been able to make some remarks in response to Councilor McGovern's question, but I would just to your point, we do need to reach that over 18 group, but I do posit that I think if our risk group is actually 14 to 23. So we do have to look at that whole spectrum, I think, okay, if we're going to have a holistic approach to the problem.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Barrett. I'm going to turn back to the chat and the people that are not city affiliated in particular to see if there's any question that they have. Bishop Ward, is there a question that you would like to put out on the floor, or anyone else? And there's a good number of people, so I don't want to start calling names. Is there someone else that would like to ask a question relative to what happened on Western Ave in the Riverside, Whitefield area?
This is Bishop Ward. Thank you so much, Councilor Simmons. And sorry, I'm offline. I'm actually riding in my car.
Okay.
Just a question. As the fall starts to kind of roll in, and I know it was an isolated incident, and there's activities that's going to be happening in different neighborhoods. Specifically, Neighboring Day is going to be happening on the 18th, and we participate in Neighboring Day. There's a number of activities that's going to be going on in different parts of the city. Is there any concern at all that you might have with regards to safety and having neighboring days just in different parts of the city? And also the Caribbean Festival is going to be coming up, and I know Boston had a shooting at the Caribbean Festival, and we haven't had anything, of course, of that magnitude in a number of years. Do you suspect anything, or is there going to be an increase of security? Maybe you can talk to me about that.
Thank you for that question, Bishop Ward. Before the commissioner answers that question, Brian Core, who's on the call, can you explain for people that might not know what Neighboring Day or Meet Your Neighbor Day is?
Oh, thank you, Councilor Simmons. So Meet Your Neighbor Day, it's the third Sunday in September, and this will be the 5th year that Cambridge has done this. It's really based on the need for people just to get to know their neighbors. We often in our community know people all across the city, but may not know the people next door. So it's really an invitation to people around the city to organize something. I know there's some people here in this meeting who are planning to organize events, and it can be anything from a picnic to a neighborhood cleanup to a block party to inviting people to your house for a meal. It's really pretty wide open. And so we have not had any conversations about having an extra security presence. I know at some of the events, there are actually police officers who just go to attend and be part of it. I also make sure that the police department does know where these events are so that more so people can visit. It hasn't ever really been seen as something around providing security for the events. But I will say that I have not heard any concerns around personal safety. And to the extent people have had any concerns, it's just making sure that they're following the proper protocols with awareness for COVID and the pandemic. And there's information on the Peace Commission web pages for Meet Your Neighbor Day as well. Apologies. Thank you, Councilor Simmons.
Thank you. So the question, it was from Bishop Ward, is do you anticipate or do you have in place, Commissioner, some procedures for Meet Your Neighbor Day, which is Saturday and Sunday? And in particular, and this is a very good question, Bishop Ward, thank you for putting it out there, the Caribbean Festival. Part of the, we've had the Caribbean Festival for a number of years. We moved it actually so that it would not fall on the same weekend that Boston had theirs. And when in moving that, we have found that the amount of violence did diminish somewhat in the last several years. And I'm sorry, Miss Nicola Williams is not with us, who runs this. They've been very successful and fairly uneventful, other than having lots of food and lots of dancing and music. So Commissioner Elo, could you speak a little bit about that? Because the Caribbean Festival is coming up, and what date is, and just for people, so people will know, what date is the Caribbean Festival? I know it's going to be at University Park, and you may want to share that as well.
It is September 11th from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. That is what we call a crucial coverage day. So we have all hands on deck. I'm going to be there. We're going to have a tent along Sydney Street. We're going to be very involved with the event. We're going to have, of course, officers in uniform. We're going to in bright green vests. We're going to have plain clothes. We're working really hard with our neighboring jurisdictions, Boston, Somerville, Everett. So we're going to have several officers from neighboring jurisdictions who are also there, who can identify, as you pointed out earlier, sometimes there are, feuds between small groups of kids that can lead to violence. We want to make sure that we stay in front of that. So we are going to be very much involved and in the mix on Sydney Street when it comes to these groups, and making sure we take the temperature down when it comes to any violence. Our presence there is really about stopping any sort of violence, and that is going to really be our goal. We work really closely with the Carnival Planning Committee, including Nicola. We've had several meetings with her. Several city agencies are involved in the planning on this, and we're going to have a really big footprint on September 11th, and we are anticipating a successful event with no violence.
Thank you, Commissioner. We have a statement from Mr. Lewis, basically talking about what's going on in Central Square, and I'm going to paraphrase. It just says, in the 20 years living in Central Square, he has been assaulted once, chased several times, screamed at, and a half dozen fights over the year, and it seems to be the same people over and over again. And I certainly appreciate Mr. Lewis's comment, and I do understand. And we did speak a little bit about this about Central Square. We're really trying to get it in hand. The commissioner just recently had a walk around 9 o'clock, about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and we were very intentional. We had the Housing Authority, the Police Department, the Cambridge Central Square bid, all present, looking at where the hot spots were and where can we apply programming. And it's important, and Council McGovern has been really upfront on this in terms when it comes to homelessness and supports for that community, or the unhoused. I don't like using that. I think we stopped using the word homelessness, trying to provide as much programming as possible. But as someone has said, and this is what's been so hard about it, is we can provide the programming, folks have to want to go, because we cannot make them. So I do want to acknowledge Mr. Lewis's statement. There is a question, and I think it's a very good question. I'll read it. What are the programs are we going to offer the victims? And is in terms of the trauma going forward that they have to deal with. I know we do have a Chief Neal with us. I don't know if that's something he wants to speak to, but I'll go first to Commissioner in terms of, are there any specific outreach we're doing? And then to Chief Neal, in the past, when we've had a violent occurrence in a neighborhood, we have set up a trauma center, a drop-in for 2 to 3 weeks with one of our community partners. In this case, because it's Riverside, it might be the Cambridge Housing Authority, it might be the Cambridge Community Center, because I'm not gonna, there may be one of our churches that are in the area. So to answer specifically to this question, where should victims or people that are feeling stressed or confused or feeling some sort of angst about what has happened, where can they go to get support? So that's an excellent question. I want to thank S. Jones for putting it into the chat. So Commissioner, I'm going to go first to you, and then I do believe we still have Chief Neal with us. I then will ask you to yield to Chief Neal.
Sure, absolutely. So we work with the Riverside Community Care. They're a resource that we partner with when there is trauma in a community, whether it's through gun violence or any other trauma. They will come to community meetings. I'm gonna talk to S. Jones after this call, and I will do what I can to connect that person directly with services.
I think, and thank you for doing that. And so I do see in the chat that you've made connections, but this is S. Jones that is speaking out, but there may be other folks. So to you, Chief Neal, if we've not done it, is it possible to at least put some services into the community that the community can avail themselves of for the next several weeks or a couple of weeks? Could you speak a little bit? Is that something within your ability to do? And I think, Mr. Clark, I see your hand. If you could put your question in the chat, that'd be great. Chief Neal?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think the question is complicated because you're talking about addressing a lot of mental health trauma. We partly address that by having a social worker within the school system. But I think this is a multi-pronged issue in that we have to bring in our faith-based community. We don't talk about that enough. I know that during my first 3 months on the job, Commissioner Elo, myself, and Dr. Greer, we attended a church session over at Western Avenue Baptist Church. And one of the things that we initially discussed was developing a church collaborative among our African-American churches. And I think that's something that we need to follow through with. Now that the health department has hired a deputy chief public health officer to focus on internal operations, I can focus a lot more of my time on building those external relationships. So I think that's part of what we have to do. Now, on the baseline level, the city does fund the C3 outreach team. Over the summer, we had 17 members, and they go out to different communities. When we see our COVID numbers spike in Fresh Pond or the north side of Cambridge or anywhere around the city, we're able to dispatch them based on data that we see. I don't see why we couldn't utilize this group as well in that regard when we see something that happens. But you have to have people that are in these communities that are equipped to go out and address some of these issues that go on. And part of our charge is making sure that it's great to hire students and young people, but you have to have folks on that team that have trust in the community and knowledge about Cambridge. In this 6.2 square miles, it's extremely unique, and you have to know who you're talking to and where you're going. And I'm going to pass this on to Dr. Porter because I know this is something that she's been talking about as we look to expand her area with the men's health program. And she's also going to be overseeing the school health nurse. And I think Dr. Porter is still on the call. I can't tell.
I believe so. Dr. Porter?
Hi, thank you, everyone. Sorry, I have a very growly, grumpy dog right now. So if you hear like sounds, please forgive in advance. So to Derek's point, yes, we've been doing, there's a lot of really thoughtful, strategy and planning that's been going into what we can do moving forward. Obviously, the status quo does not maintain. It's not providing the results that we desperately need. So through the work of, through what Derek had mentioned, we will be under the unit of resilience and preparedness at the health department, I'll be overseeing with help from Richard Harding, who's my, he's not my sidekick, I'm his sidekick, let's be clear. He and I will be working really well together to think about how can we do this in a way that makes sense. So thinking about, as I'd spoken before the summer, and I recognize the summer, just everybody gets, messed up and like, distracted and everything, and we can get back to it. But I had mentioned at the last meeting that, we're really looking to do, a super program, if you will. I like to call it a super program. I'm going to call it how about a booster program? And the idea being that it's going to be focusing on gun violence, but from different approaches. Just as we were saying, it has to be multi-pronged, right? So the health department would take on the prevention, health education, health promotion, give children, talking with, maybe with Dr. Turk about potentially doing something in the schools, about giving context about why we have to have these active shooter drills. Like, why are we doing this? I don't think my kids don't understand. And they ask me. And so I use that as an opportunity. Yeah, they're my beta testing, and really they don't understand it. And so finding ways to give context to the children or the kids or the youth or everybody generally, what are the implications of this? Why are we doing this? What is the point? What's happening in the universe that's allowing this to even be an issue? That's number one. And then number two, supporting the parents. Parents don't know how to have these awkward conversations. Like if I have a 3-year-old right now and I was, sending someone over to a play date, there's no way on God's green earth I'm going to say to them, oh, are your guns stored safely? Like, I'm just not going to do that. That's not comfortable. That doesn't feel safe to me. And so I can only imagine that other parents feel that way. So allowing a space for parents to ask the kinds of questions and give kids actual education and information that means something, right? That carries some weight. And then taking the opportunity of having the new position, this is not the new position, but the position of the health equity social justice specialist under us within the schools, have them be our connection between the health department and other parts of the city about this work. Let them do it. Let them support them to build a curriculum, just even if it's 1 hour a semester. Let's just talk about these things, right? And then on the other hand, you have the men's health, which we're going to start posting. We're going to post again we're starting back our men's health program after our dear Albert left us. We still believe in that program and we believe in that work. And I believe that this is a huge component of that work. And therefore, by having the men's health program, having this, all of these connections are being made so that it all makes sense. Instead of us all working separately in little corners and silos, let's figure out how we can all bring it to the table and work together cohesively. So that's my little pitch. I'm happy to answer questions offline if anybody would like to talk more, but we're working on developing an RFP currently, a request for proposals, so that we can create a sort of a violence interrupters model, if you will, where we would request an organization and we would pay them and they would basically do the interruption work. And then the prevention work would live with us at the health department through the core, through the health equity social justice specialist, as well as the men's health work, and in partnership with everyone. So this is the big grand idea. Like if I had my wand and I could do that, but this is the idea about how we can all bring it together and make it have sense. And then at the same time, support the services that Riverside provides, and let them know, we have a direct connection. We have them on speed dial. What can they do to support us? And making sure that everybody in our community is getting what they want. And I'm sorry, I'm very long-winded sometimes. I'm becoming an old man like my father, my old white man who just talked.
I'm gonna help you. So thank you for your comments on that.
Yeah, quickly, Councilwoman Simmons, I just want to add that, to Nancy's point, all the pieces fit. We just received these opiate dollars. In order to kind of expand some of the things that we need to do. It's going to be limitations in terms of what public health can do, but it's going to be incredibly important that we integrate with the police department, with all the service organizations within Cambridge. I'm all about innovative and being progressive, but I can look out of my bedroom window and I can see a cannabis outlet or the dispensaries. That's taboo down south. It just doesn't happen. So our message has to be clear to our young people when it's legal to purchase marijuana. So we're really going to have to engage that business community as well and have some conversations with them, not so much about prevention, but about education, health promotion. Why is it important? Parents using this, but telling their kids not to. So we have some really layered conversations that we have to address. And it's not a singular issue out there. It's a collective problem that we have across the board. So just wanted to point that out. And I know I'm the down south guy, but dispensaries are just no way to pass the Mason-Dixon line. But again, it's another opportunity for us to work on this.
Thank you, Chief Neal. So as we move towards 7:30, I wanted to at least spend some time with some discussion on follow-up and solutions. One thing I think that we have done very well this evening is there's been no naming and blaming. It's all about how can we figure out the problem, address the problem, and provide solutions. And when we do that, when we work together, we pull in the same direction, saying it's not so much who's at fault, but it's how do we build the kind of community that makes sure that we have safe neighborhoods. So I would like people to kind of, I see my colleague Mark's hand is up, to kind of think about solutions. I know going forward, Councilor McGovern and I will probably call another meeting in 2 or 3 weeks or so, just to see where we are, to join the community so they know what we're doing and what measures we're taking in terms of what's happening with the investigation, but also are there anything else boiling up? And if not, to say that, no, there's nothing else boiling up. So I did see Tony Clark had his hands up. I don't know if he's still with us. And after we hear from Tony, we'll go to Councilor McGovern. Tony Clark, are you still with us?
Yeah, I'm actually driving as well, so I'll pull over. But
please,
yeah, really quick. Yeah, really pulled over. Really quick. I saw Miss S. Jones's information in there. So there's two things that I don't know if he's on here, Ty Maletti, but My Brother's Keeper has been able to do is able to secure about 600 professional hours from therapists, particularly Black and Brown therapists. And so with that being said, they've really done a good job of supporting parents. And so that's so I just want to put that out there. If these are folks who are working pro bono, collectively right now, working with about 10 different families. Last, I want to say not last night, maybe that night. Today Monday, today's Tuesday, right? So Sunday night, we had a call with about 27 young people who were at the park on this respective night. And you mentioned something earlier, Councilwoman Simmons, around root causes. And that I can share the notes with folks on this call. I don't want to talk too much to them, but it spoke to really looking at the root causes. Like, what are the root causes? And it was very specific around these people range from the ages of 17 to about 27, of having more intentional conversation, even at middle school. And there's a plethora of things that can kind of go on, but I do think that there are, one of the other things that came out of the conversations was there seems to be a lot of programs, and these are young people talking. This is not Tony Clark talking, or there's the lack of coordination. So I know that we're on this call now, and a lot of folks who really do good work, but sometimes you can do so much good work and it's just not coordinated. And then I think the last thing we have to have, maybe not in this time, but we have to have another conversation, right? Because like 1 minute we have this kind of contentious relationship with policing, and then the next minute we're like, can the police lead on these efforts? And so I think we have to identify, to Mr. Neal's point, what makes Cambridge unique, but also what are some things that we can do that are Cambridge specific. So I think there is some programming that's happening in Berkeley, which looks like us, that's happening in Evanston, Illinois looks like us, and and also there's some really cool stuff that's happening in Ann Arbor around these type of works and how they're incorporating the universities as well, from a research standpoint. And so I think there are unique ways to think about this work, but at the same time, looking at it Cambridge specific, and I was really happy, well, not happy, I was thankful that we're not kind of passing this on another city. And I think that there are internal things where our kids are hurting. And lastly, I want to give Kesson Green a lot of credit. He's done stuff with the Midnight Basketball League, and we have had something. It started last week. I go to bed early, but we call them midnight circles, where we had about 16 specific, primarily young men from 27 to 48 on a call, kind of in group on a Zoom call. And that started last Wednesday. So these things can happen. You could be innovative, you could be creative, but I just think at the same time, kind of acknowledge what we do. And last thing I'll say is that I think we got to figure out who are the different composites of our kids in our community, right? You know, it's like, I think sometimes I think about the folks who are on this call. If you look at the list, respectfully, it's the same list all the time. But, you know, how do we kind of become innovative where maybe part of this conversation goes to Hoytfield? And so you have a different subject matter, subject experts, and then you bring it to the high school, then you bring it to the middle schools. But I do think we have to think about the different composites of the kids that we work with and what are those services that we can help them with. And lastly, what are dosages? Like, we have things that we do, but we don't look at the dosage, right? So is a league that happens over the summer the right dosage for a kid who may need something year round? And how do we like leverage that by maybe doing something with the aquatic center at MIT? So I'll put a pin in it, but I think that I want to acknowledge everybody for having this meeting. But specifically, we have some therapists on call, particularly to help with young men and families of color. And I'll put my information in the chat if folks are interested in those services.
Tony, thank you. And thank you to MBK and what you and Ty do. We really do appreciate it. And you do make some salient points about coordination, because one of the things, and it's not just with this, we do a lot of things, but we often don't map it in a way and focus it in a way. And it's not a criticism. It's saying we do these good things. Let's make sure they're hitting the right targets. And if there are deficiencies, if we look at it and work together and not silo our efforts, we might be able to be more effective. So thank you for being here and thank you for that input. Mark, I think I saw your hand up. I'm going to turn to you. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you. First, I want to thank Nancy and Tony for both talking about the support for parents, because you know, that is something we really have to look at too. It's you know, I've been a social worker for 30 years with children and families, and one night my now 25-year-old son, when he was 17, wanted to leave the house at midnight, and I was telling him he couldn't leave, and it turned into quite the heated discussion, at which point he said to me, "You're a social worker. You must be terrible at your job because you're not handling this very well." So even as a trained professional, it's very hard for parents to manage their kids when their kids want to do something that they don't want them to do. And so we have to, you know, what do you do if you're a parent of a child who, you know, is kind of involved in stuff that, you know, they shouldn't be involved in, or they want to leave the house at midnight and you don't want them to? You can't stop a 17-year-old kid from walking out the door. And so what resources do we have for parents? What training can we provide for parents? I think that's a piece that we often miss. And I'm really happy to hear that CHA is looking at that. And Tony, it's great about that you managed to secure those therapist hours. And I want to hear more about that so that I can direct people, you know, as well. But just lastly, sort of in terms of kind of Councilor Simmons, you talked about sort of next steps and whatnot. You know, I'm thinking of, you know, anytime, and few people have mentioned that, you know, this is a really complicated issue. It's an issue that plagues cities across the country. It's multi-layered. Not everything is going to work for everybody. But I think, you know, we have all kinds of strategic plans in the city for all kinds of things, but we really have not brought a group of people together to develop a strategic plan on youth violence. And I think about the plan what I just worked on in terms of homelessness. You have short-term goals to deal with the immediate needs of our unhoused community. You have medium length goals and you have long-term goals. And that's kind of what I think we need around this issue, you know, as well. We need to be in our middle schools and elementary schools talking about things to try and head off kids from, you know, kids from making poor decisions down the road. But at the same time, we have active things going on in our community right now that need to be addressed immediately. And so I think moving forward, what I would love, you know, for us to work on and with you, Councilor Simmons, is really how do we pull together, a real strong working group of nonprofits and residents and young people and city people to really say, look, here's where the needs are, here's identify the issues and really come up with a plan on how we're going to do it and where the city's going to put their money behind these initiatives. Because we really, it's the old saying, Cambridge is a lot of dots with no lines, right? We have all these things going on, but how do we bring all of that together in a robust plan that really tackles this issue in a multifaceted way, so that we can really, make a dent in this. So I just really appreciate everybody's input. And I think, what gives me great hope about Cambridge, I often say this, is that we're a manageable size city with tremendous resources, and not just financial, but people resources and committed people. And we can overcome, if any city can solve these issues, it's us. But what keeps me up at night is the fact that we haven't, right? And we should be further along than we are. I have one last question, Councilor Simmons, and then I will yield for the evening. Commissioner Elo, I've heard from folks in the community, and I think others on this call have heard from folks in the community, a concern around what people are calling sort of gang violence in Cambridge. And people can define gangs in a lot of different ways. And I'm not talking about the ones that, the Bloods, the Crips, the Latin Kings, the international gangs, although some people say that they do have some influence in Cambridge. I'm talking about groups of young people who claim a particular neighborhood, who are having conflicts with other groups of young people from other parts of the city. This has been brought up many times. Can you talk about that a little bit, and what are we doing to try, and address this if it is indeed an issue here?
Sure, thank you for that question. I'm also going to look to the district attorney to see if she wants to add anything. So, we are seeing, organized activity with, I'm going to say young people from the ages of, 16, 17 up to 30, right? Organized activity when it comes to crime and violence. We are seeing what we would call gangs. We think they're loosely organized, not as organized as some of the gang activity that you might see in New York or LA. But we are concerned. I think where I really get concerned is when we label, a group as a gang that occupy a specific area, like what that actually means for us when it comes to intervention. So I really want to be really thoughtful about, how we label something as a gang, what it means for our interventions. From the city of Cambridge, we do not have a gang database. We're not going to have a gang database, but we are concerned about the organization of the young people coming together and the violence that's then perpetrated. So we're trying to figure out ways to have some interventions where if somebody is involved in gang activity, that we can figure out ways to extract them from that gang, right? So we are looking at that. We're working with the district attorney. We're working with other service providers on what are the best interventions with that. We want to be really thoughtful and focus our interventions on people that are actually causing harm. And when you think about gang, when it comes to a geographical area, we don't want to just go in and, turn a community that is disproportionately Black and brown upside down looking for gang members. We want to be really thoughtful. We want to be building trust and not add to the trauma that has already exists in some of our communities of color. So we just want to be really thoughtful. I want to turn it over to the DA because her and I have talked about this at length.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I share the Commissioner's concern about labeling people or making too broad a pass through neighborhoods in trying to find this out. On the other hand, we are definitely seeing it. And the good news here is, as you've heard already, we know for the most part who the people are who are involved in this violence. And in the scope of the city of Cambridge, it is a relatively small number of people. So what we are trying to figure out, and obviously always being conscious of how are we building trust, what are the implications of what we're doing, but trying to be precise enough to focus on those people who are causing harm. And I will say, we're not labeling them. We certainly join the police department. We don't support that gang database concept, any of that. But I do think at some level, we can take people at their word, and these people are calling themselves gangs. That's where we get that information. There is no hesitation in labeling themselves gangs and pointing out who the quote gangs that they have issues with it are. So I do think this is a problem we want to be in front of. And I think that's what the commissioner and I are talking about all the time, is how do we do the intervention piece? How do we get to kids early enough to keep them away from this? And then how do we best target that group of people who are causing these problems?
Thank you. So we've heard a couple of, we've looked at what was the issue that we're dealing with, how we're trying, what solutions or preventions we're trying to put in place in terms of solving the crime itself, which was the interaction, but also looking forward to what we can do to, to put in some sort of programs so that it doesn't continue to happen. We've heard from Derek Neal about working with the clergy, the interfaith community, and the businesses. We've heard from Councilor McGovern around coordinating all the social services. We've heard from Tony Clark around what he's doing with MBK. And one of the things that I want to be real clear and intentional, those are very good ideas. But if we don't hear from the people that are involved, the ones that are closest to the pain, we cannot find a good solution. So I don't mind getting together with the social service programs and the police department and the interfaith community and public health, et cetera, and so forth. But we have to find a way to talk directly to those that are closest to the pain, to have them a part of the solution. Otherwise, we're going to continue to put these wonderful programs together, but we're not going to get it down to the root cause of who is being harmed and harming other people. We're just not going to be able to make a good solution to that problem without talking to people that are mostly impacted by that. So as we work together to come up with solutions, we have to be very intentional about making sure we hear, I call it the organic voices, the people that are causing the harm, the people that are being harmed. So let me just end our meeting by saying thank you to everyone that's come here this evening. Councilor McGovern and I, with Commissioner Elu and others, some of our community partners, we're going to get together to have another conversation. I am going to be very specific about what I'm going to try to do with people like Tony Clark and Isaac Gablo and a good many others, is really trying to talk to the men and women that are engaged in these activities to see if we can get their voices, because that's what's important. That is just as important. We cannot come up with a solution if we don't know what the root cause is. So thank you again, everyone, for coming this evening. I look forward to continuing this conversation. And again, thank you so much for your time, your talent, and your attention. Good evening.